My brother-in-law announced to 250 people at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner that he was taking my startup, the company I had built from nothing over 6 years. And there was nothing I could do about it. He thought my sister would back him up. He thought my parents would stay quiet. What he didn't know was that the man sitting 3 seats to his left was the federal judge who had approved my incorporation paperwork 4 years ago, and he recognized exactly what he was hearing. Let me back up. My name is Simone, and I am 31 years old. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Harlow Studio, a boutique UX design firm I started in my second bedroom with a folding table, 2 monitors, and about $14,000 in savings I had accumulated from freelancing since I was 22. Today, Harlow Studio has 11 full-time employees, a roster of enterprise clients across healthcare and fintech, and a valuation that, after our Series A round closed last spring, sits just under $9 million. I say this not to brag. I say this because you need to understand what my brother-in-law thought he was entitled to. His name is Forrest, and he married my older sister, Becca, 3 years ago. At the time of the wedding, I was genuinely happy for her. Becca and I had always been close in the way that sisters who are only 2 years apart tend to be, which is to say we drove each other absolutely insane and also told each other everything. Forrest seemed solid at first. He was a commercial real estate broker in Phoenix with a good enough income and a lot of confidence, which in the early stages of knowing someone can look like competence. It took me longer than it should have to realize those are very different things. The first sign was small. 6 months after the wedding, Forrest started asking questions that had a specific flavor to them. Not curious questions. Appraisal questions. How many clients do you have right now? Are they on retainer or project-based? What's your net revenue? I answered politely the first few times because I thought he was just making conversation. He was in real estate. Numbers were his language. But the questions kept coming, and they kept getting more specific, and eventually I started noticing that he only ever asked them when Becca wasn't in the room. The second sign came about a year into the marriage. Forrest had a bad quarter. Commercial real estate in Phoenix took a hit, a few deals fell through, and he came to a family dinner looking like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. After dinner, when my parents had gone to the kitchen and Becca had stepped outside to take a call, he leaned across the table and said, very casually, like we were talking about the weather, "You should bring me on at Harlow. I could handle business development. I know people." I told him as kindly as I could that I wasn't in a position to bring on a salaried BD person, which was the truth at the time. He nodded slowly and said, sure, and then changed the subject. But there was something in his eyes that I filed away without fully examining. A calculation, a reassessment. The third sign was when he started working on my sister. I didn't see it happening in real time. I only understood it later when Becca and I finally talked about everything. But looking back, the pattern was clear. Forrest began planting seeds, little comments. Your sister really could use someone with Forrest's connections. It's not fair that Simone gets to have this big success and doesn't let family be a part of it. You know she got her first client through your dad's golf buddy, right? She owes this family more than she admits. None of that was true, by the way. I got my first client by cold emailing 47 companies and sleeping 4 hours a night for 6 weeks. My dad's golf buddy had nothing to do with it. But Forrest had found the one pressure point in my relationship with my family, which was that my success sometimes made the people I loved feel left behind, and he pressed on it like a bruise. My parents' 40th anniversary fell on a Saturday in October. The dinner was at a private room at a steakhouse in Scottsdale, the kind of place with leather booths and dim lighting and a wine list that arrives in a folder. Becca had organized it. She had done a beautiful job. There were framed photos on the table, a slideshow running on a small screen in the corner, the whole thing. About 25 close family and friends, and a few of my parents' longtime colleagues. One of those colleagues was Judge Harold Finch. He had been my father's racquetball partner for almost 15 years, a federal district court judge who had sworn in and was an honorary godfather to half the neighborhood. He was the kind of man who wore his authority so naturally you sometimes forgot it was there, until it wasn't. I was seated between my cousin and an old family friend. I had a glass of wine and was genuinely relaxed, which, if you are a founder, you will understand is not a state I occupy often. My phone was in my purse. I was present. I was happy. Forrest stood up about 45 minutes into the dinner after the entrees had been cleared, tapping his knife against his glass. Everyone quieted. I assumed he was toasting my parents. He smiled at the room, that wide, confident broker smile he had, and he started talking about family and legacy and what it means to build something. He talked about my parents' 40 years together. He talked about Becca, and then he turned his eyes to me. And of course we have Simone, he said, his voice warming in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. Our family's very own entrepreneur. A few people smiled. My mom beamed. I've been wanting to say something for a while now, and I think tonight, surrounded by family, is the right time. I set my wine glass down. Forrest and I have been talking, he said. And I noticed he did not look at Becca when he said this. And we've decided that going forward, Simone is going to be bringing me on as a full equity partner at Harlow Studio. It just makes sense. Family should support family. Becca and I have talked to a broker, and the way we see it, 40% equity is a fair acknowledgement of the family support that made Harlow possible in the first place. Simone, I know you've been on the fence, but tonight felt like the right time to make it official. So, he raised his glass to Harlow Studio and to family. Several people raised their glasses before they understood what they had just heard. I did not move. I did not blink. My entire nervous system was doing something I can only describe as a controlled implosion, like a building being demolished from the inside while the facade stays perfectly intact. To my left, Judge Finch had lowered his glass without drinking. My father was frowning. My mother looked confused. Becca, I noticed, had gone the color of the white tablecloth, and she was staring at Forrest like she was seeing someone she didn't recognize. I slowly rose to my feet. Forrest, I said. My voice was very quiet. The room, which had started murmuring, went still again. I appreciate the kind words. But I need to clarify something for everyone here, because I think there's been a significant misunderstanding. His smile flickered. Simone, come on. We have not talked about this, I said. Not once, not ever. What you just described has never been discussed, agreed to, or even proposed to me directly. You just told our family that you are taking 40% of my company. That is not a toast. That is a claim. The room was very quiet. Forrest laughed, but it was thin. You're being dramatic. It's a family dinner, not a boardroom. You're right, I said. So let me be very clear in plain language. Harlow Studio is incorporated as an S corporation. I am the sole shareholder of record. There is no verbal agreement, no letter of intent, no term sheet, and no board resolution that grants you or anyone else equity in my company. What you just announced does not exist. And the fact that you announced it in front of my parents and their friends as though it were already decided concerns me deeply. Forrest's face had stopped performing. You're making a scene. You made the scene, I said. I'm just correcting the record. I sat back down. My hands were completely steady. My heart was going about 200 beats per minute, but my hands were steady, which is something I have always been grateful for. It was at that point that Judge Finch placed his napkin on a table. He didn't stand immediately. He poured himself a small amount of water first, very deliberately, and then he stood. He was in his early 60s, trim, gray-haired, wearing a dark blazer. He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. I'm going to say something, Judge Finch said, and the entire table straightened involuntarily, the way people do when someone with that particular frequency of authority speaks. Forrest. I've known this family for a long time, long enough to have watched Simone build Harlow Studio from the ground up. I was actually the judge on the federal docket when her S-Corp articles were approved. He paused to let that land. What you just described, publicly asserting equity ownership in a private corporation based on alleged verbal agreements in family relationships, that is not a toast. In some contexts, depending on intent and whether any investor communications have been made under that assertion, it could constitute securities fraud. I'm not making a legal determination right now. I'm telling you, as someone who has seen these cases, that you have just said something in front of witnesses that you may regret. The room was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system. Forrest had gone gray. Judge, I was just, it's a family thing. I didn't mean, I know what you meant, Judge Finch said, calmly. And so does Simone. And so does everyone in this room. He turned to my parents. I'm sorry to interrupt what should be a beautiful evening. Helen, Dave, congratulations on 40 years. He sat back down and picked up his fork. That was it. That was all he said, but it hit the table like a gavel. The rest of the dinner was not exactly festive. Forrest tried twice to reset the mood and failed both times. Becca said nothing. My parents kept exchanging looks across the table. I ate my dessert, kissed my mother on the cheek, thanked Judge Finch quietly as I passed him on the way out, and drove home. I called my attorney from the car. Vivian had been my business attorney since year 2 of Harlow. She was meticulous, she was fast, and she answered her phone on the third ring, even on a Saturday evening, which is one of the reasons I kept her on retainer. Tell me everything, she said. And I did. By the time I had finished, she was already typing. Okay, a few things, and I need you to hear all of them. First, he has no legal claim, you know that. But the fact that he made this statement publicly, in front of a federal judge who just flagged it, changes the risk calculus for him considerably. Second, if he has made any representations to third parties, clients, investors, anyone outside that room, using the language of equity ownership, that is a material misrepresentation, and we have a real problem that goes beyond a difficult family dinner. Have you noticed anything? Anyone treating him like he has a role at Harlow? I thought for a moment. 3 weeks earlier, a client contact had sent me an email that started with, Forrest mentioned you all might be expanding the team. I had thought it was odd and filed it away. I told Vivienne. She was quiet for a moment. Forward me that email tonight. We need to know how far this has spread. In the meantime, document everything you remember from this evening. Time, words, who was present. Don't talk to Forrest directly. Don't talk to your sister about the legal situation yet. Talk to me first. I went home, opened my laptop, and wrote out 4 pages of notes. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7:45. My mother. Then my father. Then Becca's number, which I let go to voicemail. Then Forrest, which I declined and immediately texted to Vivian's number with the note, he's calling, what do I do? She texted back, nothing. Let it go to voicemail. Do not engage. That afternoon, Becca showed up at my apartment. I had been expecting this. I buzzed her up and made coffee, and we sat across from each other at my kitchen table, and she looked like she hadn't slept. She probably hadn't. I need you to know, she said, wrapping her hands around her mug, that I did not know he was going to do that. I believe you, I said. He told me on the way to the restaurant that he was going to say something nice about Harlow and his toast. That's all he said. I didn't know. Her voice broke slightly. Simone, I swear to you. I believe you, I said again, and I did. I had seen her face. That was not the face of someone who was in on it. That was the face of someone who had just discovered something. He's been telling me for months that you two had been talking about it, she said slowly. That you were almost there. That you had basically agreed in principle and it was just a matter of timing. There it was. I never agreed to anything, I said carefully. Not in principle, not informally, not in any conversation, ever. He asked me once, over a year ago, if he could join as a business development hire. I said I wasn't in a position to bring on a salaried employee at that time. That was the entire conversation. Becca put her face in her hands. What followed over the next 10 days was, in the language of my industry, a full audit. Vivienne's investigator found that Forrest had mentioned his partnership at Harlow Studio to at least 4 of my clients. One of them had actually asked him for a quote on a project extension, which he had provided. On Harlow letterhead, he had apparently created himself using our logo from the website. Let me say that again. He had created fake Harlow Studio letterhead and used it to correspond with a client. Vivienne filed for a temporary restraining order within 48 hours. The basis was trademark infringement, impersonation of a company officer, and tortious interference with business contracts. The TRO was granted in 2 days. Forrest was legally prohibited from representing himself as affiliated with Harlow Studio in any capacity. His response was to call my parents and tell them I was destroying the family. I went to my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. My mom met me at the door looking like she had aged 10 years. My dad was sitting in the living room with the kind of stillness that meant he had been sitting there thinking for a long time. Forrest and Becca were there. I had not expected Becca, but she was there, sitting in the armchair in the corner with her arms crossed over her chest, looking at the floor. Forrest stood when I came in. "This has gone too far," he said. "A restraining order? I'm your brother-in-law. This is insane." I sat down. I did not take off my jacket. "Mom, Dad," I said, "I want to explain what happened, and I want to show you something." I pulled out a folder. Vivienne had prepared a summary. 2 pages, clear, factual, no legal jargon. It laid out what Forrest had done, the fake letterhead, the client communications, the equity claim made in a room with a federal judge present, the 4-year timeline of asking questions and planting narratives. My father put on his reading glasses. My mother read over his shoulder. Forrest tried to interrupt twice. My father held up a hand without looking up. The room was quiet for a long time. My mother set the papers down. "Forrest," she said, and her voice was very careful, "did you use our daughter's company name to contact her clients?" It was just, I was trying to help. I was trying to show what was possible if we actually— "That's a yes," my father said flatly. He took off his glasses. He looked at Forrest for a long moment. He looked at Becca. He looked at me. "Simone, I owe you an apology. Your mother and I both do. We didn't understand what was being asked of you." Becca finally looked up. Her eyes were red. She looked at Forrest. "You told me she had agreed," she said quietly. "You told me this was already happening. You showed me a text conversation and told me it was with her." The room stopped. "What text conversation?" I asked. Forrest opened his mouth. Then he closed it. "Show me the text," Becca said. Her voice had gone flat and steady in a way I had never heard from her before. He didn't show her. There was nothing to show. He had told her I had agreed via text, and either the text didn't exist or he had manufactured something, and either way, the answer was in his silence. Becca stood up, picked up her purse, and walked out of the house. She did not look at him when she left. Forrest tried to recover. He turned to my parents, then to me. "This is ridiculous. I was trying to build something for this family. I was trying to be a part of something. You have all this, and you hold it like it's yours alone and no one else gets to." "It is mine," I said. "I built it." He left 20 minutes later after it became clear that no one in that room was going to take his side. He drove away, and my father stood at the window watching the car until it was gone. I stayed for another hour. My mom made tea. We talked, slowly and carefully, and I told him things I had let slide over the years. The pointed questions, the narrative Forrest had been building, the way he had used their family dinner as a stage for a business move. "We should have asked more questions," my mother said. "You didn't know what to ask," I said. He was careful. The legal process was clean and humiliating for Forrest in the way that legal processes tend to be for people who did not expect to be in one. The TRO became a permanent injunction. He was required to send a retraction letter to each of the 4 clients he had contacted on his own letterhead, clarifying that he had no affiliation with Harlow Studio. Vivienne billed his liability insurance for the full cost of her legal response after we established the tortious interference claim. One of those clients, a mid-size healthcare company we had been working with for 2 years, sent me a personal email after receiving the retraction. She said she had suspected something was off when Forrest quoted her a price that didn't match our standard rate sheet. She said she was glad we were still a partner she could trust. That email meant more to me than the injunction. Becca filed for divorce 6 weeks after the anniversary dinner. She moved back into the house I grew up in for a few months while she found her footing. We didn't talk about Forrest much during that period. We talked about other things. She started taking a ceramics class on Thursday evenings. I went with her once. I was terrible at it. She laughed at me for the first time in what felt like a very long time. Forrest had no claim in the divorce that related to Harlow. There was never anything to claim. But the exposure of what he had done had an effect on his professional life that had nothing to do with me. Two of his real estate colleagues, who had apparently also received his version of events about being an investor in a tech startup, did not take kindly to discovering the truth. His credibility in his industry is something he is rebuilding on his own time. Judge Finch called my father the week after the dinner, I was told. He said he was sorry if he had overstepped. My father told him that he had done exactly the right thing. They played racquetball the following Saturday, which I think is the most my father will ever say on the subject. The Harlow Series B is in progress. We are targeting a $12 million valuation with a lead investor I have been courting for 8 months. The term sheet is on my desk. It is a real document. Every line of it is something I negotiated, something I earned, something that belongs to the company I built and the people who work there. Last week, I was in my office late on a Thursday, which is my usual state. My lead developer knocked on the glass door and asked if I wanted to walk to get tacos with the rest of the team. I said yes, which is something I have been trying to say more often. We walked 3 blocks to a place with picnic tables out front and the kind of salsa that makes your eyes water. I ate 2 tacos and listened to my team argue about a project and thought about how much I love what I have built. No one can stand up at a dinner and take that from me. No one can toast it away. No one can toast it away. No one can write their name on it and make it theirs. I know that now more completely than I ever did before. I picked up my phone on the walk back and there was a text from Becca. A photo of a ceramic bowl, slightly lopsided, glazed in a deep, uneven blue. Her first finished piece. The caption said, "Made this. Keeping it." I smiled and typed back, "It's perfect, so are you." And that, for now, is where we are. 2 sisters, rebuilding. 1 company, intact. 1 future, still being made. I keep thinking about the moment my father took off his reading glasses and just looked at Forrest. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. There's something about watching a person's carefully constructed version of reality collapse in real time in a living room over 2 pages of documented facts that stays with you. Not with satisfaction, exactly. More like a quiet, sobering recognition that the truth was always there. It just needed the right room to breathe in. What Forrest did was calculated. He didn't walk into that anniversary dinner on impulse. He had spent months building a story, telling it to Becca, telling it to my parents, telling it to my clients, layering it so carefully that by the time he stood up with that glass in his hand, he genuinely believed the ground was solid beneath him. That's the thing about sustained dishonesty. It requires a kind of intelligence, but it's intelligence aimed at the wrong target. He was smart enough to construct the lie. He wasn't wise enough to understand that every person he told it to was a witness, and that witnesses have memories. I've thought a lot about what I could have done differently, and honestly, not much. The one thing I wish I had done sooner was trust my own discomfort. I noticed the appraisal questions early. I noticed the way he only asked them when Becca wasn't around. I filed those things away instead of examining them, because examining them meant accepting something I didn't want to accept about my sister's marriage. That instinct to protect the people you love, even from information they need, is not kindness. It's a kind of cowardice dressed up as loyalty. I know that now. What held through all of it, the dinner, the legal filings, the living room confrontation, was the structure I had built. Not just the legal structure of Harlow, the LLC, the incorporation documents, the retainer agreements, though those mattered enormously. I mean the structure of how I had chosen to operate. I had documentation because I was organized. I had Vivienne on retainer because I took my business seriously from the beginning. I had Judge Finch at that table because my father had maintained a genuine friendship for 15 years with someone of real integrity. None of that was accidental. The protection wasn't a wall I built when Forrest attacked. It was a foundation I had been laying for years, one careful decision at a time. When the stress came, the structure held because it was built honestly. The hardest part was Becca. Not Forrest, not the legal process, Not the clients, I had to reassure. Becca. Because she had been lied to too, and she had to sit inside that truth and decide what to do with it. The fact that she walked out of my parents' house that night, quietly, without drama, without screaming, just stood up and left, told me everything about who she actually is underneath the marriage she had made. She had to grieve the person she thought she had chosen. That takes a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, like a slightly lopsided ceramic bowl, glazed in deep, uneven blue, imperfect and completely real. I don't think life sorts itself out because the universe keeps score. I think it sorts itself out because choices compound. Forrest made small, dishonest choices for years, and they compounded into a room full of witnesses and a federal judge who knew exactly what he was hearing. I made small, careful choices for years, and they compounded into a company that survived intact and a sister sitting across from me in a ceramics class laughing at how bad I am at it. That's all it ever is. The choices you make when no one is watching, laid end to end, until one day they're the only thing holding you up.